Welcome to this week's Adult Summer Reading Program event. If you didn't realize it, this is the middle of the Adult Summer Reading Program, which you can do from now until August 11th. You can either sign up online or you can pick up a game card at any of the reference desks in the building. And for adults, it's really easy. You either read 5 books or you read 3 books and come to 2 events. This counts. So you're already 1/5 of the way done. Every Wednesday night from now until, including the first Wednesday of August, we will have a summer reading program event here in the library. Tonight, our theme for the summer reading program this year is Build a Better World. So when I was thinking of people or groups that represent Build a Better World, Habitat for Humanity was one of the first things I thought of. And so I sent an email over, and lo and behold, their executive director, Mark Patton, wrote back and said, I'd love to come. So he's here tonight to tell us all about Habitat for Humanity and what they do and how they're doing things here in Iowa. I know they've got some new stuff going on. So take it away, Mark.
Well, thank you, Beth. Thank you all for coming tonight. I tend to give a presentation that covers a lot of things about an inch deep, and if there's questions or comments, please interrupt me as we go along, because I don't talk just about habitat, I talk about housing in general. And if I talk about housing in general, I really am talking about financial literacy also. So that's an important topic that we'll probably come back and visit about. So the question I want to start off tonight is, who needs housing? And this is an audience participation thing too, so who needs housing? Everybody. Well, we're going to explore that for a second. So if you look at that, you say yes, 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 everybody needs it. Although this gets a little tricky if somebody doesn't have papers. You can't buy a house in this country with a federally regulated bank unless you have papers. Doesn't mean you have to be a citizen, but you have to have papers. And the reason I put you at the very end is what happens in my life experience is that when people get housing and they're satisfied with it, if that's ownership, they tend to forget about what it really costs other people or how difficult it is to find that perfect house or housing. So it's important to start off by knowing that housing is not a right, which sounds a little odd because we all agree that everybody needs a place to put their head down at night. What I say is that everyone needs a place to live. They need to pay for it somehow. This country's short about 1.2 million units of housing just for home ownership, not rental, to meet pent-up demand right now. And this number is actually low. I did this slideshow about 6 months ago, and this is probably about 230,000 now. And so then I ask for people for the historical reference, like what's the difference between the houses we're building today and what your parents probably experienced after World War II? Well, most of us grew up with roommates or siblings somehow. 2 bathrooms was probably, the exception rather than the rule. A 3-stall garage, that was like unheard of. A big yard, well, depending where you lived. A family room, that was your living room. A man cave, I still don't know what that is. AC, dishwasher, granite countertops, these are all have become almost what's expected. So our tastes keep rising, and our demand for housing keeps rising, but our incomes don't. So we have some problems we'll talk about in a little bit. So these are some interesting trends, and again, much of this talk isn't related about habitat particularly, it's about housing in general. The size of the average American household, 2.6 per household, has not grown in the past 30 years, but the average size of our new homes, have increased by 22% in the same period of time. So while we know there's a crisis with housing, what we build doesn't necessarily stay smaller or get cheaper. This is pretty fascinating. 1910, 1,326 square foot for a family of 4.5 people. And now, for 2.5 people, basically, it's 2,400 square feet. So what's changed? You know, we have this trendy thing called tiny houses now. And, you know, I'm all for tiny houses as long as I'm by myself. But we have some social considerations that we probably didn't have back in a long time ago. This is another depressing statistic. There were more 3-stall garages built in 2015 than 1-bedroom apartments. So housing is both rental and ownership. And the rental market is getting tighter and tighter. After the recession, a lot of things changed we can talk about. There were a lot of rental units built. There's a lot of pent-up demand by the millennials right now for ownership, but there's a lot of mismatches in terms of what they can afford and what's out there. So today, what do we have in Iowa City? The average of all rentals is 1,239. 1 bedroom, 830, 2 bedrooms, 997. That's probably eked up a little bit in the last 6 months. And then you compare that with if Johnson County had kept the $10 minimum wage, the rule of thumb, and this is an important thing to remember whenever you're talking about housing, the rule of thumb for anybody of any income level is nobody should spend more than 30% of their income for housing. Whether you're making $10,000 a year or $100,000 a year, 30% is the rule that everyone accepts as the number you should not exceed. So when you look at the $830 a month average, that requires roughly a $33,000 annual income, or $16 per hour. The state is getting ready. No, they rolled it back. So we're not going to have the 10-10 wage here. It's going to be rolled back to the minimum wage of 7.25. Update my slide. So if you had the income, here's the other things you need. If you haven't rented for a while, these are some of the things that probably come into play in the last 20 years. Credit check. My God, I can never remember renting 30 years ago and having a credit check. I didn't have any credit. References, maybe. Criminal background check, that's fairly new. Legal status, that's one place where, in this community, some landlords, some mobile home parks care, some don't. And we can talk about what happens if you don't have legal status. 2-month security deposit and a 1-year lease. And I like to say in Iowa City, we live in this free market system, but all the rents are August 1st, regardless. I mean, it's just, how does that work? So what keeps students from, when they graduate, from buying a house? And one of the reasons is debt. So we're at about $32,000 per student debt. And maybe that trend will slow down, we don't know. Nobody knows what the federal government's going to do about student debt, but when you have that much debt, lenders don't like to lend to you because you owe too much. So I just printed this, got this out of a publication the last day or two. $21 per hour for a 2-bedroom apartment, national average. They'd have to work 117 hours per week to afford a modest 2-bedroom rental home, not purchase. 11.2 million severely cost-burdened rental houses spending more than half. That's what severely cost-burdened means when you talk about statistics. Well, if you're spending more than half your income for housing, what are you shorting? Food, medicine, transportation, insurance. Else. What's that? Education. Yep. Healthcare. Prescription. Yeah. So, I jump around a lot, and I want you to ask questions as we go here. But with the recession, 2007 on, things changed with credit in this country. And it's coming back. It's kind of scary. It's coming back where you can probably buy some houses with nothing down these days, but there's some catches to that. But for a generally accepted mortgage, you have to, of course, have good credit and little debt. 10% or up to 20% down payment. So do the simple math. If it's a $300,000 home, that's either $30,000 or $60,000 just down payment cash. Another $2,000 in closing costs, and this 30-year loan, if people opt for that, would be about $1,600 per month. So a lot of young people are kind of torn, like, do I buy, do I rent, am I moving? The rule of thumb is you don't want to buy if you think you're going to be moving in 4 or 5 years, you don't buy. So how many young people have roots or enough stability to decide that? So this is a topic I could do a whole presentation on, and I hope I don't offend anybody here tonight, but I feel pretty strongly about some of these things. In Johnson County, there's 3,000 mobile homes. And how this came onto my radar was a few years ago. I was talking with a group of seniors up in Solon, and they said, well, there's no mobile homes in Solon. And somebody said, there are 3 mobile homes right dead center in the middle of Solon. And they said, no, there's not. I've lived here my whole life. Exactly. They drove by them, and they were invisible. So if you drive up Prairie du Chien, I mean, you drive out on Route 6 to Tiffin, I mean, there are mobile home parks all over the county. The average lot rent's about $350. Any mobile home that was built before 1976 does not meet code. That means there's aluminum wire, which has been banned. That means there's maybe an inch thick wall. And nothing in a mobile home, even today, is standardized. So if you had owned a mobile home and you wanted to go fix a window or a door or a sink, you can't buy the part at a hardware store. You have to special order it because everything that goes in a mobile home is different. It's really pretty when it's manufactured. It looks like chrome faucets. Well, it's not really chrome, they're plastic. So I went to visit a mobile home factory in Pennsylvania once, and they welded the underneath frame, and then they put down the floor, which was made of particle board, not plywood. And when I say particle board, you know, if you have a countertop that's particle board and get some moisture on it, what happens? It grows. So the floor of these mobile homes are particle board. And then the next step for most construction would be you put up the walls. No. This is mobile home construction. They put down the carpet and the vinyl. And I said, why would you do that? And they said, well, then we don't have to tack it or glue around the edge. They put the walls on top of that. I said, well, then what happens if they want to change the vinyl or carpet? Oh, not our problem. So, again, I could talk for 2 hours on this because it's so depressing. But people who own mobile homes think they have a lot, and they have something. But the rules of the game are stacked against them. So, with the recession, all the predatory subprime lenders went out of business. And when that happened, all the sales for mobile homes stopped. So the only mobile homes that you would have seen going down the highway in the last 10 years were going to North Dakota. Anybody know why? They had a fracking boom and not enough housing. So all the mobile homes were going that way, and then down in Florida and Arizona where there's not inclement weather, there were still mobile homes. But everywhere else in the country, mobile home sales stopped. So there used to be a mobile home sales place on Route 1 going, you know, halfway out of town. That's gone. You drive through mobile home courts now, and you will see empty pads pretty often. They will not be filled up again because nobody can get financing to buy a mobile home. So gradually, the mobile home courts are emptying out. The thing that really irks me the most, and we tried to get it changed about 8 years ago, and it was embarrassing how lopsided the vote was in the legislature. But about 20 years ago, the manufactured housing group got the rules changed in Iowa so that people renting in a mobile home court have fewer rights than a normal tenant. You don't have to give cause to evict somebody. You can evict somebody in 10 days or less. So here's how it goes. You own a mobile home. And you may or may not have clear title, and that's another story because people don't always get clear title when they buy mobile homes. So you get clear title maybe, and it's yours, and then your teenager drives too fast or whatever the reason is, and the court owner says, sorry, nice of you to be here, but we can't have you anymore, bye. So you got 10 days to move everything. Well, nobody moves mobile homes once they're parked. It's like a misnomer. So after 10 days, you take all your stuff, you leave. Well, your mobile home is still there. If you miss the next month's payment, guess who gets the mobile home? So there are some really good ethical mobile home court owners, and there's some really bad ones. And I can tell you the really bad ones have a game going where they just turn those things over, and people think they have something, and they don't have much. So on a financial basis, if you looked at the difference between owning a mobile home and owning a real piece of real estate, mobile homes lose almost 2% of their value every year. An average home increases nationally on average, I mean, depends on the region, about 3% a year. So if there's 2% going down and 3% going up, that's 5% difference in 1 year. And then next year it's another 5%, and the next year it's another 5%, and the next year it's another 5%. I get mobile home unit owners really mad at me because they say, you don't understand, this is mine. And I said, I understand that. But if you have moldy floors or you can't afford your utility bill because there's not enough insulation, if the windows don't open for fire egress, if your landlord gets mad at you, you don't have anything. And that's really hard because in our society, generally, mobile homes have been considered sort of the bottom of the barrel, like that's where you start, or that's where you go if there's no place else to go. There are fewer and fewer mobile homes in this county every year because if they blow away, burn up, whatever, they are not being replaced. As I said, there's no financing for them. Banks will not lend for them. So there are no equivalent units being built. They're considered by taxing authorities and by lenders as like a vehicle, like a car loan. And they lose value every year, and at some point, they're not worth lending against. So there's some of the legal shortcomings I just talked about. And it's so bad that in Johnson County and other counties around Iowa, every spring in May, they have something called the tax certificate sale. So every piece of property that doesn't pay its property taxes comes up for a tax certificate redemption. And investors like these things because if they buy the tax certificates, they will either get the property in 3 years or they get 18% return on whatever they bid on the property. So they get one or the other. So that's really popular. In most counties in Iowa, every piece of real estate that comes up to the tax certificate sale, it gets snarfed up because somebody's either going to get the property or they're going to get 18%. Except mobile homes, which nobody can quite understand, and there's zero that are bought up at tax certificate sales because nobody has clear title or they don't know what to do with them, they can't move them, and anyway, it's just a nightmare. So in this county, when we did the research 7 years ago, 2/3 of the mobile homes don't pay their property taxes because the treasurer won't go after them. So how Habitat works, so this is really quick, speed up some things here. We have a double-blind selection process, and the criteria is based on employment, income, credit, debt. Instead of doing a cash down payment, Habitat families have to put in 250 hours of sweat equity, which means helping build their house or somebody else's house or working in our restore. How many here know who's been to our restore? 1, 2, it's a destination, isn't it?
Cool.
Yeah.
I've taken stuff there too.
Yeah, it's a two-way street. So the restores are our version of Goodwill for big stuff. And it's out on Scott Boulevard. And this year we will have sales of $500,000 of all donated stuff that would have gone to landfill otherwise. And from that, we can build the net proceeds, we can build about 2 houses this year. So, and they can come work in our restore. We sell the house at no profit with a zero-interest loan. And the zero-interest loan is what really makes it affordable. We're having to play with that a little bit because when you loan money out for 25 years at 0%, you just die. I mean, we've got 100 mortgages and it just comes back in drip, drip, drip. So we're trying to figure out what else we can do. The amount we have to raise the money every year for every home we build, so that limits how many we can build. And right now our lot prices, except for the rare exception, are $55,000. That's before you ever build anything. So how do you keep it affordable? So I throw this in because Everybody saw the television show Extreme Home Makeover, and they get us confused all the time, and I throw it in because this kind of helps clarify what the difference is. So in Extreme Home Makeover homes, they're usually built in a week by a bunch of employees coming together. They have fancy features. They're built to wow the family. The family's sent away on vacation, so they don't touch the house. They're built without any family sweat equity, and this is the important thing we're going to get to in a minute, they're given away for free to the family. So, juxtaposed with Habitat, ours are built with community volunteers and with the partner families, so they have to be involved day one. They're built simple, and we can't build them as simple as we used to because of societal pressure says we don't want just simple looking boxes, we want ones that look like everybody else, so our homes keep growing. Right now, we build the most energy efficient house in the greater Iowa City area. And there's a real sad story to tell you about that. And this is a story about low-hanging fruit and how we as a society don't look at the bigger picture. So I'm going to have you two come up front for a second. And you're both going to be builders with me, okay? Now, are you a green type person or not?
Sort of.
Sort of. Are you?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to make you a builder, and you two are going to compete with each other. And you're going to build the same house he's building, except you're going to build it to code, period. And he's feeling guilty about global warming and how much oil we're burning and how much we're polluting. He says, for another 8,000 or 9,000, I can put in better insulation and better heating and cooling and better ventilation so we don't get any mold. And then the banker comes and says, well, we got to appraise your houses. And you got identical houses, they're each 2,500 square foot, 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, and yours is going to appraise for $280,000, and yours is going to appraise for $280,000.
Oh.
He put an extra $8,000 or $9,000 in his house, and he can't get paid for it.
But I admire him.
Yay! So the lesson is,
That'll put food on the table.
we need to reward people for doing it the right way. What we reward is nothing at this point. So when I talk to appraisers and bankers, I say, why don't we reward energy efficiency? Well, we've never had to do that.
There's no appraisal criteria for it.
None. And if there's no appraisal criteria, nobody values it. Doesn't mean it isn't valuable.
Right.
So when we do this, when we build a Habitat house, our homes will use 25 or 30% less electricity and fuel per year for the rest of their lives. 80, 90, 100 years. This is the simplest, best investment anybody can make. But because you're the builder who doesn't get paid for it, it doesn't make economic sense for you to put it in your house. He just lost 8,000 or 9,000 because he's a good guy.
Well, no one keeps their house for 100 years either.
No, but our society pays the price. Yeah, that's right. So, and unless you're a consumer and demand that from your builder, it won't get done because they won't get paid for it.
And the consumer has to keep their house for at least 20 years to break even on that.
Yeah.
Cost too.
But if they're incentivized, I mean, there's ways to give credits back. I mean, there's all sorts of things to do. So, thank you.
I thought I was going to,
Build?
yeah.
Oh,
I thought I was going to.
I didn't come prepared for that. So the low-hanging fruit, as a society, people say, well, why does Habitat build the most energy-efficient house? Well, because we're both the builder and the banker. From a banker point of view, this is like reasonable to me. I go to my banker friends, I say, are you risk-averse? And they said, well, of course we're risk-averse. And I said, no, you're not. They said, what do you mean you're not? I said, if you were risk-averse, you would do what we're doing and make sure that the house got built right, because then the family has more money to spend on paying your mortgage back unless they have to pay for utilities. That's simple. So, back to Extreme Home Makeover. There's a house they built in Savannah, Georgia. This is the depressing thing. On average, Extreme Home Makeover homes are up for sale after 18 months or foreclosed on. They average $11,000 in property tax, even though this was given to them for free. They have high utility bills, insurance, upkeep, And 60% of them are lost after 3 years.
Even though they're given the house?
Yes,
Because they couldn't afford it to begin with.
that's right. It's like worse than winning the lottery. They got this great big gift, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't show that show 3 years later. So in our family's cases, we give a year's worth of classes before they ever get in their own house. Because if they've been renters or they're immigrants, there's lots to learn. And even that doesn't do justice for what you need to know to own a house. So Habitat, where we sell a house to a low-income family, has a 2% failure rate, which is slightly lower than the average, national average for the whole nation. It's about almost 3%. They pay full property taxes, they take the classes, and as I told you earlier, 25 to 30% heating and cooling costs. And none of this is rocket science. Some of it's as simple as putting caulk in every crack in your house before it's, sheetrocked. But builders in a hurry, nobody pays them to do it that way. We do some energy auditing on the side. We have some funny equipment, infrared equipment and all that. We went out to a house in Solon. It was a $500,000 house. It was a year old. And the guy said, something's wrong with his house. And we did the infrared thing on his walls, and guess what? There was insulation missing in half the places. But if the consumer isn't standing there, isn't demanding, or doesn't have a good, honest builder, guess what? So there's a house we built that's about 3 doors away from City High School on 4th Avenue. That family, it's a single mom. She's Hispanic. She lived in the mobile home court below the Hy-Vee on the south end of town. What's the name of that? Yeah, up on the hill. Hilltop, thank you. So, the reason I show this house is because she had papers and she has 5 kids, and her oldest remembers her giving birth, or trying to give birth, in this mobile home, and because the doorways and the hallways are so small like they are in most mobile homes, the EMT guys couldn't get through there, so her oldest daughter, who was 7 years old, helped her deliver on the bathroom floor. And this is America. So, there's nothing special about this house except it's got 5 bedrooms. It extends out toward the rear. We didn't used to put garages on, but because garages aren't for cars. Did you ever know that? They're for stuff. You go by big, fancy neighborhoods, and the driveways are full of cars because they got so much stuff in the garage. So, what are we going to do in the future to try to beat some of this? We're building some zero lot line houses in Hills, Iowa. Hills finally got public water a year or 2 ago, and we bought a couple of lots. I'm trying to design some small, handicap-accessible 3- and 4-plex condos for seniors to move out of their bigger homes so that we can buy their bigger homes from them for younger families to keep their neighborhoods owner-occupied and give them a handicap. And it's a complicated thing, but there's a demand for it. We may have to start charging some interest on some part of it, a hybrid mortgage, just to raise more money because we can't keep up. And this is an important thing I'm going to talk briefly about. We'll continue to serve migrants due to credit and debt concerns for the native-born. So, and don't be embarrassed to raise your hand on this. How many of you, K-12 or university or wherever you went to school, have had financial literacy classes? How long?
Probably a year's worth.
A year's worth?
In 12 years.
Oh, over 12 years?
A little bit each year.
So, who does financial literacy not affect? It's everybody. Well, why don't we teach it? I can give you some reasons why we don't teach it, but people make money on the ignorance of other people. So a local bank, I asked an officer there, I said, how much do you make on fees and charges that didn't exist 10 years ago? He said, oh, about 1/3 of our profits. If you knew what those fees were really cost you, you would avoid them. If you were educated about what credit cards really cost you, or revolving credit, or, my God, furniture rental places, or check cashing places, the list goes on and on and on. Once people get themselves trapped in those things, they can never get out. And so the poor remain poor, even if they don't want to be poor. Even if they're almost middle income, they're still poor sometimes. And it's so bad that what I tell people in our classes is, how many is the right number of credit cards to have? We say 1. And they say, well, what about Shell, or what about Sears? No. Anyway, the point being that if you only pay on the credit card statement the minimum owed, a couple things happen. Your credit score actually goes up if you pay on time. They give you more credit, they let you borrow more on their credit card. And if you only pay the minimum amount, you will never get out from underneath it. If you only pay the minimum amount, it takes somewhere between 9 and 11 years, if you never charge again on that credit card, to pay off that credit card. But nobody talks about that or explains it. If you go to H&R Block for their instant refund, or what do they call it? I guess it's instant refund. It's been too many years. I got the fine print on their contract. So this instant refund, which is you're going to get the refund, you just get it that day instead of waiting 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They loan the money to you. And you read the fine print, and the one I read was 224% interest. And the reason they don't feel it, or they don't understand it, is because it might only be $20 or $30 or $40, because it's only a loan for 2 weeks or 3 weeks until the refund comes. But you aggregate that by all the H&R Block offices, it's a lot of money. So people say, well, Habitat in this community, you only serve immigrants. That's pretty true. About 90% of our families in the last 10 years have been immigrants. Why do you suppose that might be? What makes them different than you or me? I'm presuming you're not immigrants, but I don't know that.
They're willing to ask for help.
No, American native borns are willing to ask for help.
They're willing to put in the work.
They're focused on their work. They're focused on their family and their kids.
But I mean, they're willing to put in the work.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They're scared of debt. They don't trust banks. They don't trust credit card companies. They know about debt. And even though they may be ignorant about some of the tricky things we do in our marketing, as I say to them on the television and the newspaper, if they talk really fast, or there's a lot of fine print at the bottom, that's really bad. We try to keep it kind of simple. They are so scared of debt that they won't even go to a bank they don't trust banks, because oftentimes the countries they come from, they weren't trustworthy. So there's some education to do there, but the net effect is I've got about 100 mortgages out there. About roughly half of them are native born and half of them are immigrants. I've never had one late payment from an immigrant family. If I could say that about half of the rest of them, I would be a happy camper. They are focused. In fact, we had a Habitat family make the news in a bad way back 2 or 3 days after the election. I don't know if you remember about a family up on Prairie du Chien that got a notice post on their door 11:30 at night, basically telling them to go stick it somewhere and the black people go home, and I'm using nicer words. And they were a Sudanese family, and if I told you these were the nicest people I know, the parents are both master's educated. Immigrants can't often get the same job in this country, so they are both para-educators. Their kids are all straight-A students at West High. They're going to Yale and Harvard. I mean, these are stellar citizens. And the parents are working these para-educated jobs because they know they want to get their kids situated. They're not buying snowmobiles and motorcycles and campers and going to Riverside. So we have a double-blind selection process, and if you have bad credit or too much debt, you don't make it into our queue.
Just out of curiosity, if a lot of the immigrants don't like banks, then how are people paying?
They don't see us as a bank.
But are they giving you cash? I guess that's what I'm asking. Are they?
Oh, we make them open a bank account.
Okay, that's,
But what we say is, you know, you don't take all the products the bank has to offer, the credit union has to offer. We try to educate them about that.
okay.
Yeah. So there's some things going on. We know the baby boomers are going to be moving on, if you will. There's a demand for appropriate housing. So is it smaller housing, handicap accessible housing? It's really difficult. Maybe somebody has a reason. It's difficult for me to convince a 30 or 35-year-old to buy a 80-year-old house. They mostly want new stuff. And that's a challenge because it's not affordable for them. So in terms of the baby boomers, I went to a big conference once and they asked, okay, how many people, there's 300 people in the audience, how many people want to move into assisted living? You know, maybe a third of the people said they raised their hand. And they said, okay, put your hands down. How many of you want to move into a nursing home? 0. So the question becomes, you know, what can we do to create housing that is a substitute for a nursing home? We have visiting type nurses, we have all sorts of things, so this 3-plex and 4-plex thing we're designing right now is going to have a little extra space for live-in healthcare, or in this community, if you think about people who are going to nursing school or med school, or, you know, there are all these health professions being trained here. Students can't afford a rent, so maybe there's a live-in situation where they just check in with their, you know, senior partner there. And as people age, if they're still in big 2-story, 3-story houses, and they can't clean out their gutters, they shouldn't be up on ladders, they're not mowing their yard, they can't clean the sidewalk, we have to create something that are less than, Oak Knoll is a fine place, but it's too expensive for 80 or 90% of the population to move. So we started a program, we've been doing a little bit of this and we're formalizing now, called Helping Hands, just for elderly, to allow them to live in their own home for a little bit longer so they don't have to move. 0 interest loans to them. We do restrict it where we don't set foot inside of mobile homes, because once you find one problem in a mobile home, you find 5 others, and there's no end. But we need people to step up to help donate money to, if we're going to loan it out for 0 and it comes back at $25 a month or whatever, it just takes a while to build up a till to service enough families. So this year, right now in Hills, we're doing a 0 lot line, 2 builds, a memorial build, interfaith build down there. In about end of August, we'll start the women's build house, which is on the southeast side of Iowa City. And this started, I don't know if this is our ninth one. The very first women build house was on Diana Street. And it was really successful. A lot of women came out, everybody got excited. And it's interesting because Diana Street, which is sort of near Lansing Funeral Home, we built all over the community. We build in communities all over the place. We build in southeast Iowa City. On Diana Street was the only time we've ever been broken into and had our tools taken. So when people think the crime is on southeast Iowa City, forget that. We've never been bothered in southeast Iowa City. Anyway, the first year we built this house, everybody got excited, the women all turned out. And the next year we did another women's build house and nobody turned out. And it's like, then I got scared, and it's like, what happened? Well, it wasn't new and different and original. So then I got worried, and I said, okay, if we're going to make this successful, we have to personalize it somehow. So we decided to start naming after a woman. And my criteria was she had to be known across the community, and she had to be alive to enjoy getting the house named after her. Because if you're dead, who cares? So the very first house we did was for Dottie Ray. Oh, it was great. She was pretty handicapped, but she would come out with her daughter every once a week and see the house. And we have done it for Christine Grant and, my gosh, I'm going to lose all the names. I'm going to be Pat Hyde, who just retired from Oak Knoll. State Senator, had a hyphenated last name. You know.
Her house was on a tour this spring, or her old house. Lloyd Jones.
Yes,
Jean?
Jean Lloyd Jones. So we do all these women, and what we find is that they have friends and they have family, and all of a sudden we get more people to come out, and it's just more fun. And what we do on a women build, and this is really critical for everyone to hear, my lead construction person is a woman, and most people are kind of surprised by that. She's very good. And what I told her day one was, we try to assess the skill levels of volunteers when they come out to a build site. And what I said is, you want to save yourself a lot of time. When you ask a guy what his skill level is, you just downgrade it by a third. And when a woman comes there and she says what her skill, you increase it by a third. They're much more careful. So there's a modular house plan up at Dyersville, All American Homes. And if you ever get a chance, tour it. It's just fascinating. But the beginning of the line where it's all framing and all roofing and all this, it's all men. And at the other end of the line where they're painting and trim and hanging cabinets, it's all women. And I said, well, what's the difference? And they said, well, women care more about detail. I said, well, then why aren't they at the beginning and the end? This doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I developed a lot of opinions over time. So these are things you can do. The Restore, it's the only store in town that doesn't advertise for customers. We don't want customers. We've got plenty of customers. We need donors to keep our shelves, supplied.
What was that collect bottles of cans? What's that? What is that?
The which?
Collect bottle of bottom.
Oh, I'm a member of the AM Rotary Club, and out at the East Side Recycling Center, which is, I'll tell you a story about that in a second. We collect bottles and cans, and Habitat gets a fourth, and the Rotary gets 3/4, and they give.
It's like your pop can.
Yeah.
Take to the,
Yeah, instead of waiting Hy-Vee and doing that.
no, I take it to that can shed.
Yeah.
So I could bring like a sack of them?
Yeah, and if you want, you can bring them at our place or at the can shed. If you put them under the Rotary account, all that 100% of that money goes for scholarships. We just don't advertise it very much.
No, we don't.
But if you have a church or service club or anybody, you got a bunch of cans, we'll stop by and pick them up.
But there's a place out at the Restore shed to put bottles and cans that,
Yeah, there's a little shed there you can throw them in, right up next to the Restore.
and can I like bring the big sack like I would take to the can shed?
You can if you tie it up, you can put it outside the shed and we go and collect it once a day.
Okay.
Yeah. And from that, it's kind of meager, but we make $5,000 or $6,000 for scholarships every year. We take cars too. Everybody takes cars. So things that are kind of odd is we don't always hear from seniors who need help. And there's lots of pride and whatever, but if you know somebody who needs a ramp, you know somebody who needs grab bars, basic stuff like that, we can whip those things out like nothing. We need people to advocate for affordable housing. And generally, I don't like to use the term affordable housing because people get the wrong idea. Affordable for anybody, whether you make $5,000 or $50,000, what's affordable? And the problem is, Iowa City is pricing itself out of affordable housing. And I'll give you two examples, and this is an example. These are both examples of something that's your glass is half full or your glass is half empty. Who remembers the married student housing had over on Mormon Trek? Okay, we got new housing there. What's the difference between what we had and what we got? The rent's doubled. It's nicer housing. Well, you may not think it looks, but anyway, it's more energy efficient, a few other things. It costs twice as much. Out at Lakeside, Dolphin Point, whatever the name was, okay? Everyone agreed that was bad housing. Yes. It's going to be student housing this fall.
Is that what it's gonna be?
100% rented up already. It's not even done yet.
Really, I have watched that beginning to today.
Yes. Yes.
That's all students?
It's going to be all students.
So far away.
Well, what do they care? There's going to be, they got a bus service for the lodge, so they're going to have a swimming pool and a workout place and all that.
That's all students.
Yeah.
They tore most of them down.
They only tore a couple down. They redid most of them.
Okay, so.
They drained the lake, which I don't know how they did that, but anyway, they're all rented. Again, you got rid of bad housing, the rent's doubled. So is this a good thing to happen? Housing is darn expensive. So when we talk about advocating for affordable housing, this city council, whether you like them or not, has advocated to say in I'm getting all my rivers messed up between Coralville and Iowa City, riverfront crossings, or whatever we're calling it here, 10% of the bigger buildings have to have affordable, either there or someplace else, affordable housing built at the same time. And that's like the first time that's happened. As a result of some of us advocates working together, the county, Johnson County, for the last 2 years, The only county in the state of Iowa has allocated $600,000 per year the last 2 years that goes to the Housing Trust Fund that gets lent to Habitat and Housing Fellowship and others to build affordable housing. They're all loans. We pay it back at low or no interest. So there is some progress, but we're actually losing ground in Iowa City. As I say, if you know the suitable building lots, we very seldom find infill building lots in existing neighborhoods, but we like to build there. And that's a kid that just, his folks are from Serbia. Most of our immigrants are victims of war or refugee camps. And his dad drives for Pizza Hut, and his mom is a teacher's aide, and they do quite well. Everyone needs a home. With kids, they know that kids, irrespective of income, so high income or low income, kids that live in owner-occupied housing do about 30% better in math and reading because they're not moving every 2 or 3 years. It's that simple. So that's where we are. I forgot to edit this. We're actually cutting back our donations Tuesday through Saturday, but that's where we're located. I covered a lot of things real quickly. I can talk about housing finance. I can talk about what housing costs. I can talk about what keeps.
A little bit about what you take at Restore. What do you take?
What do we take?
Yeah.
Almost anything that's associated in or within your house or on your house, as long as it's in working order. We take appliances. We take furniture.
You do take furniture?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Really?
Oh yes.
I did not know that.
We take kitchen cabinets. Those are our biggest seller. But what we don't like to take are things that nobody really wants, or they can, like used toilets. Like, it's hard to sell a used toilet. It's hard to sell doors and windows that don't have frames, because unless you have the exact right size opening, we don't have enough skilled people to make them
I
work.
called out there and they said that I do have some screens, a bunch of screens
Yeah.
and windows.
Yeah.
And they said they'd take them.
Yeah, maybe somebody may modify them. But almost anything else that goes into a house. So we'll tell you, and we do free pickups. That's the other thing we do. That makes a big difference. We will do it within 2 or 3 days of being called, and a couple of the other charities aren't quite as responsive, but we like to pride ourselves. If you know people that live in North Liberty, we've got national demographic information that says we're not getting enough donations from North Liberty. And there's a rule of thumb amongst donors that, for some reason, I don't get, if you have to drive more than 5 miles to donate, you won't donate. Even though it's loaded, that's the hardest part of getting it in your vehicle. But people from North Liberty think that Scott Boulevard's in Muscatine County. I mean, you know, it's another world. So, questions?
I've got one.
Yes.
Tell us more about the Women Build and how we get involved and who we contact.
On all of our builds, you can go to our website. Oh, there it is up there. And on that, it says how you can volunteer. All of our builds, wherever they are, and it will say where they are, what days we're going to do, and what kind of work we're going to be doing. There's an electronic sign-up. It'll have how many slots and whatever, and you can, starting in August, we will have volunteer slots. We wait till August. We actually had to do a Mother's Day wall build to get $5,000 from a sponsor. And then we wait for the students to come back to get all the athletic teams and whatnot involved. And then in August, we'll start building that house.
What skill level do you have to have? I mean,
None.
none?
None.
Okay, so the question was, what skills are needed to participate in a build?
None. We provide the tools. We provide the training. If you don't feel like you can swing a hammer, which, you know, it's fine. We have a lot of international students that never have swung a hammer in their life before. We have a place, volunteer registration. We need help to sign people in. There's first aid, there's refreshments, we have people bake. So when we do an elderly person's repair, we always require sweat equity of them too. Well, if they're elderly, what can they do? But if they can make cookies or coffee, they're participating. So there's no minimum skill levels.
Okay.
Yep. And the thing that's really helpful, I think, if I say this, you're going to be shocked. Our homes are not affordable because of volunteers. I can build a house faster and cheaper better if I give orders to pros. Because volunteers, sometimes I have to take walls apart that just got built, okay? We make sure it gets done right in the end, but volunteers are there for a lot of other reasons. They're giving back to the community, and a lot of them are learning what goes into a house for the first time, because everybody's going to live someplace. Well, if someday you build your own house or you're going to buy a used house, we can educate you a lot about what to look for in a house. And then there's the camaraderie, and the best story I have about volunteers is we got this big donation from a doctor. We never get donations from doctors. And so I was like, what's this about? And I called him up and I said, you gave us a really nice donation. And he says, well, that's because last spring I had the best day I ever had with my 16-year-old daughter. We were on a build site and we bonded. And it's like, you know, as a parent, my parents gave us a used pool table. And it's like, okay, whatever. With my 3 teenagers at that time, that was the best thing I could have had, because you can have 20 or 30 or 60 seconds of silence and it's not uncomfortable. On a build site, you can stand around the hammer, walk around, you know, do whatever, and it's not uncomfortable. And people socialize and they get to know each other. When we get businesses out there, we had a Hills Bank build once, and the board of directors and the president of the bank all came out. And the tellers were in seventh heaven because they were ordering the board of directors around because they knew more how to build than the board did. So, no skill level minimum. Yeah. Any other questions? We're in a kind of scary, I maintain, and I'll close up here, I maintain that our housing model in this country is broken. People aren't earning enough to live here. And that's just not Iowa City. That's, well, if you go out in western Iowa or the Dakotas, you will see affordable housing, but there are no jobs.
What about all these apartment buildings that are going up? I mean, there's gigantic apartment buildings going up in Iowa City. Who's going to live there? I just don't understand it.
They seem to keep filling up. They keep building hotels too, and they keep filling up. I'm at a loss.
Yeah.
This is a very attractive community to live in. So we know retirees are moving here. We know that, you know, 25-year-olds want to stay here, even if they graduate from another college, they move here. So this is attractive. You've got medicine, you've got all these services. If you go to 20 miles away, to Lone Tree, to Washington, they're dying on the vine. So somebody's living here and they pay a price. And the people that really pay the price, I maintain, the ones who are driving on 380 every day from Cedar Rapids. It's cheaper to live in Cedar Rapids, but they pay a price. So we have a broken system where our wages aren't keeping up, our housing costs, you don't know this probably, but just in the last month or two, under our new administration, we have a trade war with Canada on lumber. All the lumber you see out there is going to cost 30% more than it did 6 months ago because we're having a dispute. That will make housing more expensive. You work with youth. Where do they live? At home, if they can?
No, I mean, most of them are homeless or are in like the transitional living program.
What's the health outcome if you're homeless?
Not very good.
No. So when I started off by saying housing's not a right, nobody in this country's ever thought that housing should be a right, but everybody agrees that everybody needs housing. So we have to sort of bridge our understanding. And I did get a T-shirt for a friend of mine that retired in Muscatine County last week he headed Muscatine County Social Services, and I got him a T-shirt that says, "Make America kind again." So last thing is, everything is tied back to housing. And those of you who have your own housing, I have my own house, if you would take a break and think about if you were young and dumb again today, how could you afford housing in Iowa City?
I don't know. I mean, who live in Lone Tree?
Yeah. And it's one of the bigger stressors, you know, when they talk about medical health insurance, you know, the foreclosure rate and the bankruptcy rates were tied back to medicine and housing. those two things. And the last thing, which is sort of, I don't like, my wife says you shouldn't talk about depressing stuff, you know. But the big money out there in the last 3 or 4 years has been buying up vacant housing and renting it out. And better than that, they're leasing it out. And so somebody's on a lease purchase. Anybody tell me what the good and bad about that might be?
You miss one payment, it goes back to the person who owns it. And
Really?
you're out all of the equity?
And no foreclosure proceedings.
No.
And by the way, you know, if you're leasing, are you supposed to pay taxes and insurance?
Well, you would think that the landowner would do that, wouldn't you?
You would think that.
Nope. Nope.
Doesn't have to be
It's
true.
all on the leasee.
And
And
And the
it's.
same thing with reverse mortgages for seniors.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on if it's a bank, a regulated bank, it's okay. But if it's Fred Thompson or whoever's doing all the advertising, who's it doing?
Yeah.
The Fonz, whoever it is.
Gotta be something wrong with that.
It is!
But
Because
it's not illegal.
it's not illegal. Check
Yeah.
cashing is the worst thing that we got. It's not illegal, and I don't know why, but because they got really good lobbyists. But for reverse mortgages for seniors, unless you read the fine print, unless it's a regulated institution, they don't pay the taxes or insurance. And the moment you don't pay your taxes and insurance, guess what? You're in violation.
And you've lost all that money that you thought was equity.
Yes.
It's theirs now. Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark, for this. It was fantastic. And I'm hoping that our audience at home and our audience here in the room will take the opportunity to check out your website, come out and visit some of the, he didn't mention it, but you are always welcome to come out to a build-in process and find somebody in a t-shirt and say, can you find somebody to give me a tour? They will walk you through the build site, tell you what's going on, explain what's going on, see if you want to use a hammer. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and I hope our people at home also
And
go out and,
one thing that I did not mention that's not directly tied back to us, but what we host, is in our offices, we lend out office space to a group from Cedar Rapids called Horizons. And Horizons is a nonprofit financial counseling entity that for people under 80% of median income, which is probably about $75,000 for a family here, anybody under that can come in for free financial counseling. And the problem is, people don't usually come in until it's way late. But for people who are getting a fresh start, who want to figure out how to budget, or what bills to pay off first, what to do, we have free services available. And as I say, usually it's too late by the time people really want to avail themselves of it. But for some of your kids, if they're open to it, you know, I always say to my family, when's the right time to buy a new car? So when we're having our families go through classes, what do you suppose the answer is?
never
That's one of the answers.
buy a used car.
That's one of the answers. The other is you never buy a new car before you buy a house. Because lenders look at your debt ratio. And if you get a $25,000 or $35,000 car, you're upside down with debt for too long. So we say either never buy a new car or wait till you buy a house, and then everybody will lend you money then, which is another story.
Well, thank you very much.
My
This
pleasure.
was
Thank
a
you.
lot of fun.
Thank you for coming out
Thanks for coming,
tonight.
everybody.